This podcast is brought to you by Curate Investments. Each of our funds is managed by different teams of highly skilled people we have handpicked to look after your money. That is the art of investing. For more information, visit us at curateinvestments.co.za. Curate Investments is an authorized FSP.
Welcome to Honest Money. I'm Warren Ingram.
I'm Pieter Villers.
So we're starting the next in our series of life stages in career stages. So we've covered people in the first stage of their career, the first 15 years, and then the second stage, so from the age of 35 to 50. And now we're in the people in the sunset of their career, not the sunset of their life, but the sunset of their career. So somewhere around age 50 to 65. And we've got a few topics to cover in this series.
Yes, it's that phase in life where things really starts to get serious now. When money becomes like a serious consideration of, all right, I'm not going to be able to work forever anymore. At some point, I'll have to scale down. Do I have enough? Or if I don't have enough, what do I need to do? So there are four main topics that we're going to cover in this series. We're going to start by talking about debt and debt in retirement or debt at retirement. How do we approach that, and what is the best ways to look at it? We're going to talk about investing in this 15 years before retirement, where it's quite now really doubling down and going full throttle on your investments to make sure you have enough, how to navigate that. We're going to talk about a very important element that oftentimes get missed, estate planning, tax planning, making sure you've got a tax efficient estate, especially now at the point in life where you've accumulated a lot of different entities maybe and different structures, and how to just bring all of that together and make sense of it. And then we're going to end up with a discussion on kids, because at this point in time, your kids will probably be out of the house now. They're done with school, they're in university, hopefully they're independent. And I think especially something that I often see is kids overseas. How do we navigate that? How do we, as South African residents that know we're going to stay here, how do we approach our kids that are maybe living in another country, and how do we approach our finances that way? So those are the four main topics. Today we're going to kick off with just debt. How do we approach debt in the pre-retirement phase?
So I think what's interesting about when you reach this age and stage of your career, as I am, retirement goes from being a concept, like an academic thing that happens to somebody else.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, you hit 50 and you go, well, hang on, that could be 5 or 10 or 15 years away. It's not academic anymore. It's real.
Yeah.
If I look at the kind of big data sets from the banks, it seems that it sort of age 48 to 50, it becomes reality for all of us. So if you're watching and you're 50 and all of a sudden you've woken up going, gee, I'm going to retire. Welcome to the club. It's okay. This is fine. And for me, the one thing, why are we starting with debt is, debt is always a weapon of wealth destruction as far as I'm concerned. And so, yes, you can use debt constructively in some instances, and that's great. But a lot of the time, debt erodes your capital.
Yeah.
And so it should be a core focus when you're at this stage where hopefully you're at your peak earning ability. You've got a lot of experience under the belt. You should be adding the most value to either your business, your profession, or your company, and therefore you're earning the most. And now you've got this time frame where you need to get the kids on their way, get them out of your expenses, and then knock down your big line items. And your big line items are usually going to be things like your home loan, your car. We hope what we were talking about off air is that you're not sitting there with store cards, credit cards, personal loans, overdrafts. But if you are, this is the time and the stage where you have to knock those things out.
Yes. Yeah, the principles around money stays the same regardless of age or age group. Like we always say, starting, you have to have a budget, you have to pay off bad debt, build up an emergency fund. Those things don't change as you age. If we all start with step one and you have to go through that cycle, hopefully at this point you've sorted that out and you're now probably hopefully at a point where you don't have any bad debts or no credit cards. Hopefully you've paid off your car, or when you replace your car, you would have saved up quite a large deposit, and it's not like a deal breaker for you. It's not killing your monthly cash flow. And so I think the big one we should focus on is a home loan, because in previous episodes we said you have to be cautious early on in life, in your early career, to feel pressure to buy a house because it's expensive. There's a lot of upfront costs. It's a home loan every month. It takes a big chunk of your salary, especially if you in the early days. So you have to wait until you are ready. And mostly, I mean, it depends. Personal finance is personal, but probably looking at buying a house at the age of like 35 to 45. So you're probably in, once you hit 50, already paying off your home loan, and maybe you in that mid term, if the home loan is 30 years, like 15 years in, or it's 20 years, 10 years in. So you're faced with the situation of, should I invest aggressively or should I pay off my home loan? Which one do I do first? And what we want to hit, like a milestone that I think is important to want to hit at 65. Let's use 65 as a general retirement age. Could be earlier, it could be later for some. But ideally, you don't want to have any debt at that point. If you do have a home loan, you want to have paid it off. For the simple fact that if you now, at this point, you've just accumulated wealth, you've contributed and you've built up your wealth, but now you're going to start drawing a pension down. So your investments are going to earn an income, and home loan is probably one of your biggest line items in your budget. So it's going to put a lot of stress on your investment portfolio to have to continue paying off that home loan if it comes from your monthly cash flow. Now, in the next series, we're going to talk about options when you reach retirement. Some you can take out as cash and maybe use that to settle the bond. Some you can use for monthly cash flow. But I think the principle remains that if you are retired from your pension income that you earn from your investments, ideally don't want to have a large chunk of that going into a bond, because it means you're going to have to draw down a lot more from your, let's say, maybe a living annuity, which is going to potentially put your capital at risk. And that's something we'll go deeper in the next series. But I think from the principle itself, try and be debt free at 65. That's kind of what we're trying to get in this life stage.
Yeah. And maybe just the logic of that, because we often get, you and I will both get this question from people to say, well, put extra money into the bond. Why don't I take that extra money out and invest it? I can get much better growth. And usually when you probe that question a bit deeper, what will happen is someone will have looked at an investment statement and their stockbroking account did very well the year before, or their index account or their unit trust account, whatever it is, and it's done well, and they saw a 20% return. And then they look at their home loan, and let's say they're lucky and they're paying prime -1, so they're paying 9.5% interest, and they say, well, it's obvious, I must just invest. Maybe just the logic there is the 20% you saw on your unit trust statement is a historical thing, and it's very nice to see, and we should all enjoy it when we see it on our statements. But the reality is, the next year that could be -20, could be -30. Whereas you look at your prime -1 interest rate, that return or that interest rate of 9.5%, that's a guarantee.
Yes.
And it's a guaranteed tax-free. If you compare it to investments, it's guaranteed and tax-free. And so I think at this stage of life, when you're earning well, hopefully, you want to go and eliminate the uncertainties as much as possible. You want to get to the point of retirement where you're dealing with, the uncertainty of how long you're going to live. You're going to deal with the uncertainty of markets, but you shouldn't have the certainty of debt compounding against you. And so that trade-off, when you look at, if you're watching this episode and you're going, well, these guys don't know what they're talking about. My investments have gone up so well. They have, but think about 2022, or think about, times before that when they haven't done well. You don't want to be living off your capital as a retired person and funding this monster of debt that compounds against you. You just need to understand, compounding doesn't care how nice you are, doesn't care who you are, doesn't care what you've done in your life. It just compounds against you. And the other party that doesn't care here is the bank who's lent you the money. At some point, they're going to take your house if you're not careful. So I think it's a very simple thing. You're not at the stage of, even if you feel like you haven't got enough money accumulated, you're not at the stage where you take excessive risk. And I think taking money out of your bond when you should be knocking your bond down is excessive risk at this stage of life.
It's a very important point you mentioned is that after-tax return. Because if we think about, if we owe the bank money, let's say 10% per year, and we pay extra into the bond, it is a tax-free return we're essentially getting. Because if we don't have to pay 10%, then we're actually earning it back. It's a different way to think about it. Now, if you are in a normal taxable discretionary investment earning in the markets, you actually have to go and calculate what your after-tax return would be, because maybe you are a very high earner, most likely in the peak of your career, in a high taxable marginal tax bracket. And depending on how you invest it, if it's capital gains or dividends or interest, you need to have to do an after-tax calculation to see your return on your taxable investment. And that you can compare with your bond to understand if my bond is 10%, but I'm actually only getting an after-tax return of 6% in the markets. Okay, well, it actually makes sense to invest in my bond. If you are invested in equities, most likely it will be very close, or maybe a bit better, but that's on average. And we all know that the average is just a statistical number. It's not the reality. And some years it might drop. And I think an access bond is always an interesting one because people almost use it as like this,
Their
this
money.
fountain of,
Yeah.
I can use it for anything. And, I put my emergency fund there. It's cool. If I need money, if I need to buy a car, I take money out, I do it. And that's true. You can. Just have to be careful that you don't treat it like that up until the day where you realize, okay, this fountain is depleted and I can't work anymore. I can't earn a salary and I still have to face reality and pay this massive bond. Because we always say this as well. There's always the number, the maths, statistical answer, and then there's the emotional answer. And I think when we reach retirement, and well, I'm not there yet in that sense, but the conversations I've had is it's a very stressful transition to have because you're going from working and having purpose in your career to retiring and having to find something else to fill the time, and that's already stressful. Now a bond will add to that, and we want to try and reduce the stress, like you said, the variables, the unknowns, to make that transition as smooth as possible. And I think a bond is one of the things that can add to that. One thing that I've also noticed a lot of times people miss is if you are paying off a bond, a large portion of your cash flow is going into that. And when they do, like, especially the DIYers, they tend to forget that at some point they're going to pay off the bond. And then that's going to open up a lot of cash flow that can then be invested. So always remember that as well. Even if you now are adding extra to your bond, and let's say you projected to pay it off at 55, that cash flow will open up, and for 10 years you can go very aggressive with your investments as well. So don't discount that fact as well. It's not money. Well, hopefully once you pay it off, you're not going to spend all of that. That's not the idea. If you manage to survive on what you have after paying off the bond, see it as that cash flow will just be redirected into investments. And this is that stage of life where you want to go quite aggressively. And that's the next episode.
To save aggressively.
Yeah.
And I think maybe just you make a very good point around the emergency funds, because it's one of the things I believe is if you have a home loan, that you then aggressively overpay money into the home loan so that you've got your emergency fund sitting there. And that is wonderful, as you point out, until the day you then pay off your home loan and you take ownership of your house away from the bank.
Yeah.
So it should be, in this stage of life as well, that you then aggressively get the home loan to zero, and then those first few months of new savings, because you now have the extra money, that you're building up your emergency fund.
Yeah.
And I think we would always say kind of 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses in an emergency fund is great until you get to retirement.
Yes.
And then to your point, it's an emotionally traumatic thing. It's a stage of life, and you think that when you've changed stages of life, that it would be something that's very exciting. I'm free. I don't have a boss, or whatever the deal is. I don't have clients, or whatever the thing is. But actually, people do find it as traumatic as divorce. As any other, like as moving a house, etc. It is one of those. Maybe you want to increase your emergency fund, and my view is, it's not about the most efficient tax planning in a situation like this. It's about saying you get yourself through the trauma of not having an incoming every month. You've only got outgoings. And so you consider, pushing it out to maybe 12 months. And for some people who are finding this very stressful, they might go to 2 years. If you're married, you can split that between the two of you to get some tax benefits. Yeah. But now at this stage of your career, that you are getting the bond down, building up the emergency fund, and don't listen to the tax person who says, well, hang on, that's a bit of extra interest here. Yeah. That's fine. Then top up your RA. but I do like the idea of using this time to get that emergency fund going. But please don't do that until your bond's sorted out. Get your
Yes.
bond done,
Yes.
get it out the way. And by all means, take a month or two of payments and have fun with that money. It's it is a milestone to get. I think for parents to get your kids educated and out of the house and earning their own money, and then getting bond free is a milestone worth celebrating. And I think maybe just on cars, because we need to touch that. You also need to know that at some point you're actually not going to be able to get finance. Like you just, the banks are not going to say to you, "Where's your salary slip?" And then you go, "No, I don't have one." They're not going to just say, "Well, that's fine. We'll give you some money." There might be a point where with a home loan and with car finance where they just say, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's right. Like you shouldn't be taking on debt. And so, again, paying down your car and building up a car fund, money that you know is available to replace the car.
Yes.
And please don't tell me at age 65 that, I just bought my forever car at age 64 and I don't need to buy a car for the rest of my life. It's not true. No, there are very few people. I'm not going to say nobody. I'm sure there's a farmer somewhere still driving a 1980s Merc or a Toyota. But for the rest of us, our cars are going to be replaced, whether it's every 10 years or every 15 years. And if you're 65, that means, if you're changing cars every 15 years, you probably need to do it twice. So you are going to need money for cars. Don't tell me about your forever car. I'm not interested. It's not true. You're fooling yourself. You can't fool me. I've watched this movie before. So you're building up your emergency fund and you're building up your car fund.
Yes. And I like that point which you said, that celebrate the win. I mean, paying off, owning a home, it's almost like a pipe dream for many people at this point, especially for people my age. It's like, will I ever get to that point? It's so expensive, especially in Cape Town. So when you do get to the point where you've got the keys and you've closed your account at the bank and this is now yours, you've got your name on the deed. It's a massive milestone, and celebrate it. Go have fun. We, like you said, maybe use 1 or 2 months of that installment and go and celebrate. Because it's never about the destination, it's about the journey. And once you've hit that checkpoint, life doesn't stop there. I mean, you still have a large portion ahead of you, but also take a moment to celebrate it. And you hopefully will then, a house is by nature an asset, in the sense of a lifestyle asset that you'll continue living hopefully in that house at retirement. But one thing that might happen is you've maybe bought a house when you had a family, so you've got kids, maybe 2 or 3, that was big enough for those kids, and they're out of the house now. And now you've got the big house and the bond that you're paying off. Hopefully you've paid off, but the house might be a bit too big. That is a topic we will cover in the 4th episode a bit deeper. So it might be that the house that we haven't really considered as an investment asset up until this point might become one that you could later on sell and move into a smaller place and then open up that capital. So, but the principle remains, we're trying to get to that debt-free period where we want to say, like, I don't owe anyone anything. I can constantly just go into this next phase of life without at least that stressor holding me back. And I can now, as if your kids are out of the house, there's hopefully some cash flow that opened up there from school fees, university fees, that you also want to potentially redirect into the home loan and just like aggressively club that thing until it's done.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we might actually meet our time target for once instead of blowing it out.
Yeah.
I do want to say to you that one of the things about this stage of your career is, if you are at peak earning and you've got peak debt payments, it's one of those times where this is not where you put your head in the sand. Look at the reality. Understand that the position that you're in now. And then take some action. So to your point around the big house, if you bought the big house and you were living the big career life that was impressing everybody except your bank, now is the time to say, well, okay, I've got 10 or whatever, 5, 10 or 15 years of earning left, and I don't need to fund all these expenses. And so, if you are in the big house, maybe now is the time to sell the house, scale down to create that space to get the debt off, and then build up your capital so that you have compounding working in your favor. Rather just use the time to be constructive now, and just look at the mirror and this is where we are. This is how our life is, and and not don't have the regrets, because I think also it's a weird thing now, the psychology here. This is where the time of midlife crisis.
Yeah.
And as much as you can reduce the pressure on yourself financially, the better. And maybe just the last point around psychology here is, you mentioned about finding new purpose at in the next stage of your life. And I think now is the time to start figuring out the things that are important to you that are not work.
Yeah.
And what gives you meaning and purpose, and start working on those. And please don't sit there and say, I'm just going to mountain bike, or I'm just going to play golf, or whatever it is, because those are not those. Firstly, you can't do them every single day, and secondly, you won't find meaning and purpose necessarily. So it's also time to kind of build up that other portfolio of assets in your life, your social capital, etc. But I mean, we can spend hours on that, and we're not going to. We're gonna hit our time. So I do want to say, before I wrap up and hand over to you, thank you to Sealand for dressing us again. As you can see, we've gone from lots of layers to fewer and fewer as we go. So we appreciate the support.
Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. So we've covered debt now. It's our first checkpoint. And next episode, we're going to talk about investments and how do we now look at our different investment vehicle options, our approach to investments. Does it really change from what we did 5 years or 10 years ago? Will it change 10 years from now? And how can we make sense of that cash flow? Let's say we have paid off the home loan now. What do we do with that cash flow? So I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation to be had, because I think that's where it really becomes fun, and also where it becomes very important to make good financial decisions and to avoid money traps. So that's going to be our second episode, and then the other two we will introduce at the end of the next one. And but thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions, and then we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you so much for watching.
This podcast is brought to you by Curate Investments. Each of our funds is managed by different teams of highly skilled people we have handpicked to look after your money. That is the art of investing. For more information, visit us at curateinvestments.co.za. Curate Investments is an authorized FSP.